So it finally happened. The call got made. The check got written. Some suit in a tower somewhere just authorized payment to a professional, a psychologist. Not for themselves. No, for you. Yeah, you. Because, apparently, your brain has become a problem that requires institutional intervention. Apparently, the way you think, the way you process, the way you exist in this world has become so fundamentally threatening to their comfortable little reality that they needed to bring in a specialist.
I just finished this book, and honestly, it is one of the best things I have ever read. Dark psychology, mental discipline, how to never let anyone control you again, it's all in here. Every single chapter hits different. This book will rewire the way you think. This is not just a book. This is a weapon for your mind. Get your copy right now. You need this.
Someone with credentials and theories and diagnostic frameworks. Someone who could study you like a specimen, decode you like a puzzle, and deliver a neat little report that would finally explain what the actual hell is wrong with you. Except here's what they didn't expect. Here's what the billionaire sitting in his leather chair sipping his overpriced scotch didn't anticipate when he made that call. The psychologist came back confused. Not concerned, not alarmed, confused. Because after weeks of observation, after analyzing your patterns and your responses and your emotional architecture, after running you through every behavioral model and personality framework they've been trained to use, they hit a wall. Not a wall of resistance, a wall of recognition. They realized they weren't studying a broken person. They were studying someone who had systematically debugged the programming everyone else still runs on. Someone who had identified the code, rejected the updates, and built their own operating system from scratch. The psychologist sat across from that billionaire, report in hand, and said something that made every executive in that room shift uncomfortably in their seats. I don't know how to categorize this one. They're not disordered, they're not unstable, they're just unreachable by conventional influence. And that makes them more dangerous than anyone we've profiled before. You see, here's what really happened. This wasn't about understanding you. This was about controlling you. Because somewhere along the line, you stopped responding to the usual methods. You stopped chasing validation like it was oxygen. You stopped trading your dignity for acceptance. You stopped performing your personality for people who wouldn't know authenticity if it shook their hand. And that made you a glitch in their system. Because the entire infrastructure of modern manipulation relies on predictable human behavior. It relies on people needing approval, fearing rejection, craving belonging. But you walked away from the table. You looked at the game they were all playing, the one where everyone pretends to be happy while slowly dying inside. And you said something unforgivable. You said no, not loudly, not dramatically. You just stopped playing. And when someone stops playing the game, the players panic. Because if you can exist outside their rules, it means the rules were never real. And if the rules were never real, then everything they sacrificed to follow them was for nothing. So they called in the psychologist. They needed someone with authority to confirm what they desperately wanted to believe, that you were broken, that your refusal to participate was a symptom of something diagnosable, that your independence was actually isolation in disguise, that your silence was depression, your confidence was narcissism, your boundaries were trauma responses. They needed the professional to validate their narrative, to give them permission to dismiss you as damaged, rather than face the terrifying possibility that you were just awake. But the psychologist couldn't do it, because the data didn't match. Your nervous system wasn't in constant fight or flight. Your social withdrawal wasn't avoidance, it was selection. Your emotional regulation wasn't suppression, it was mastery. You weren't running from pain. You had metabolized it, turned it into fuel, used it to build a fortress where their words couldn't penetrate anymore. The psychologist looked at the patterns and saw something they'd never seen before in all their years of study. Someone who had taken every betrayal, every abandonment, every moment of being underestimated and overlooked, and instead of breaking, had rebuilt themselves into something untouchable. And that terrified everyone in that room. Not because you were violent, not because you were vengeful, but because you represented proof that the system was optional. That the endless pursuit of more, the performance of success, the addiction to external validation, all of it could be rejected. You were walking evidence that there was another way. A way that didn't involve selling pieces of yourself for a seat at their table. A way that didn't require you to shrink so others could feel comfortable. A way that meant you could look at power structures that had dominated human behavior for centuries and simply opt out. And now, after spending all that money, after bringing in the expert, after running you through every analysis available, they're left with a conclusion that makes them sweat in their custom suits. You can't be bought. You can't be shamed. You can't be manipulated through fear or flattered through ego. You have become the worst possible threat to a system built on control. You've become someone who doesn't need them. And people who don't need the system don't just survive, they expose it. The psychologist's report is sitting on that billionaire's desk right now. It's not what he paid for. It's not the diagnosis he wanted. It's something else entirely. It's a mirror. Because buried in all that professional language, underneath all the clinical terminology, there's a message he can't ignore. This individual has achieved something most people spend their entire lives trying to reach. They've separated their identity from external validation. They've processed their trauma instead of projecting it. They've built emotional immunity to manipulation tactics that control 99% of the population. They don't fit our models because they've transcended them. And right there, in that sterile office with its expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city full of people still playing the game, the billionaire realized something that made his stomach turn. He'd just spent a fortune to confirm that someone he'd tried to break had actually won. Not by beating him at his own game, but by refusing to play it at all. Let's talk about what happened before that phone call. Let's rewind to the moment they first noticed you. Because this didn't start with the psychologist. This started months, maybe years ago, when you made a decision that rattled their carefully constructed reality. You stopped showing up the way they expected. You stopped responding to the hooks they'd always used to pull you back in. The guilt trip stopped working. The fear of missing out lost its grip. The need to prove yourself evaporated. And suddenly, you became invisible to their radar. Not because you were hiding, but because you were operating on a frequency they couldn't track. They'd send the usual signals, the passive-aggressive comments designed to make you doubt yourself, the strategic exclusions meant to make you feel small, the subtle competitions meant to keep you chasing. But you didn't bite. You didn't react. You didn't give them the emotional response they were farming for. And that silence, that refusal to engage with their manipulation, it drove them insane. Because manipulators need reaction. They need to see their impact. They need confirmation that their tactics work. But you gave them nothing. Blank face, level voice. Zero emotional availability for their games. And when someone can't get a reaction from you, when they can't make you dance to their rhythm, they start questioning their own power. So they escalated. They brought in reinforcements. They whispered to others, built little coalitions, created narratives about you that were designed to isolate you further. They thought if they could paint you as difficult, strange, too intense, too cold, that you'd come crawling back, desperate to correct their perception. But you didn't. You let them talk. You let them build their stories. You watched from a distance as they constructed this fictional version of you, and you felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, not even disappointment, just observation. Because somewhere along the way, you'd learned the most powerful lesson anyone can learn. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Their stories are their cages, not yours. But they needed closure. They needed to understand why their methods stopped working, why someone they used to control had slipped through their fingers. So, they invested, hired the professional, brought in someone who could supposedly crack the code, and the psychologist went to work, studied your social patterns, your communication style, your emotional responses, interviewed people you used to know, analyzed your past relationships, built psychological profiles, and slowly, a picture emerged. But it wasn't the picture they wanted. It was a picture of someone who had systematically identified every manipulation tactic used against them and developed immunity. Someone who had studied the game while everyone else was just playing it. Someone who had taken every attempt to diminish them and used it as data. You weren't just surviving their attacks. You were studying them, learning from them, building defenses they didn't even know existed. The psychologist found journals, not of pain, but of pattern recognition, notes about human behavior, observations about power dynamics. You'd been doing your own psychological work, your own analysis, and you'd come to conclusions that took most therapists decades to understand. You figured out that most conflict isn't personal, it's projection. That most cruelty comes from people fighting their own reflection. That the ones who tried hardest to break you were the ones most broken inside. And instead of hating them, you became fascinated by them, studied them like a scientist studies specimens. Not with malice, with curiosity. You wanted to understand the mechanics of manipulation, not to use them, but to become immune to them. And that's what the psychologist found. Not a victim, not even a survivor. An observer who had turned their own suffering into education. Someone who had weaponized awareness. Someone who knew the game so well they could predict every move before it happened. And that level of consciousness, that degree of self-awareness, it can't be controlled. It can only be feared. Because once someone sees the strings, once they understand exactly how the puppet show works, they can never be made to dance again. The billionaire read that report 3 times, each time hoping he'd missed something, some weakness, some entry point, but there wasn't one. Every paragraph confirmed what he didn't want to face. You'd become untouchable, not through wealth or power or status, through understanding. You'd studied the psychology of control so thoroughly that you'd immunized yourself against it. And now he's sitting with a problem money can't solve. How do you control someone who doesn't want anything you have? How do you manipulate someone who sees every tactic coming? How do you break someone who's already been broken and put themselves back together stronger? You can't. And that's why he's terrified. Because if one person can break free from the programming, others can too. If one person can see through the illusion and still function, still thrive, still exist without playing the game, then the game itself is exposed as optional. And if it's optional, his entire empire, built on manufacturing need and exploiting fear, becomes obsolete. Here's what they don't tell you about becoming psychologically free. It's lonely as hell. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from having no one around. The kind that comes from seeing things others can't see. From understanding patterns that remain invisible to people still caught in them. You can be in a room full of people and feel like you're watching from another dimension because you've been behind the curtain. You've seen how the magic trick works, and now you can't unsee it. Every conversation feels like watching actors read from scripts they don't know they're holding. Every social interaction reveals the subtle power dynamics, the unspoken negotiations, the manipulation masquerading as connection, and you can't point it out because people don't want to know. They want to believe the illusion is real. They want to think their choices are their own. They want to feel like the game they're playing matters. So you learn to speak two languages. The language everyone else speaks, full of polite lies and comfortable fictions, and the language of truth, which you mostly speak to yourself. The psychologists noted this in their report: your ability to code switch between worlds, to appear normal while being fundamentally different. They called it adaptive camouflage, the ability to blend into social environments while maintaining complete psychological independence. Like a deep-sea creature that's evolved to survive in conditions that would crush everything else. You learned to exist in their world without being of their world, to participate without attachment, to observe without judgment. And that made you even more dangerous, because you could move through their spaces, understand their language, predict their behavior, all while remaining completely unreachable. You became a spy in your own life, gathering intelligence, understanding systems, learning the rules so well you could break them invisibly. People would talk to you and walk away, feeling like they'd connected with you, never realizing you'd given them nothing real, just mirrors, reflections of what they wanted to see. You became a master of the performance, but you never confused the performance with your actual self. And this is what the billionaire couldn't comprehend: how someone could be so present and so absent at the same time. How you could engage without attachment, participate without investment, exist in the system without being controlled by it. He'd built his entire fortune on understanding human psychology, on knowing which buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which desires to manipulate. His wealth came from being better at the game than anyone else. But you weren't playing a better game. You'd left the casino entirely, and that broke his understanding of how humans work. Because in his model, everyone wants something. Everyone has a price. Everyone can be bought. If not with money, then with status, with acceptance, with love. But you'd done the impossible. You'd killed your own desire for things that could be weaponized against you. Not through deprivation, through understanding. You saw how desire becomes leverage, how wanting becomes weakness, how every attachment becomes a chain. So you performed the most radical act possible in a consumer society. You stopped wanting what they were selling, not just their products, their approval, their validation, their version of success. You looked at the life they said you should want, the one everyone spends decades chasing, and you felt nothing. Not disdain, not superiority, just disinterest. Like looking at a menu in a language you don't speak. It's not that the food is bad, it's that it has no meaning to you. It doesn't translate. And that indifference, that genuine lack of desire for what they fear, it's more threatening than any rebellion, because rebellion still acknowledges the system, still gives it power through opposition. But indifference dissolves the system, makes it irrelevant, and there's no defense against irrelevance. You can fight rebels. You can't fight someone who simply doesn't care about the war you're waging. The psychologist tried to explain this to the billionaire, tried to make him understand that you weren't an enemy. You were something worse. You were proof that his entire worldview was built on sand, that the power he'd accumulated, the influence he wielded, all of it depended on people playing the game, and you'd stopped playing. Not because you lost, because you saw through it. The psychologist used careful language, professional distance, but the message was clear. This individual has achieved a level of psychological autonomy that makes them immune to conventional influence. They've separated their sense of self from external validation. They don't need approval. They don't fear rejection. They don't crave belonging to groups that require them to diminish themselves. They've become self-sufficient in the one area that matters most, their own mind. And buried in that assessment was a question the billionaire couldn't escape. If this person could break free, could anyone? And if anyone could, what did that mean for systems built on keeping people trapped? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because the billionaire didn't just read that report and walk away. He became obsessed, started digging deeper, wanted to know everything about how you got here. What was the turning point? What was the moment you broke free? What was the catalyst that transformed you from controllable to untouchable? And the psychologist went back, interviewed more people, dug through your history, tried to find the origin point. And what they found wasn't what anyone expected. There was no single moment, no dramatic revelation, no rock bottom that launched a transformation. Instead, there were thousands of tiny moments, paper cuts of awareness, small realizations that accumulated over time. Someone promised you something and didn't deliver. You noticed. Someone smiled while lying to you. You cataloged it. Someone tried to make you feel small, to feel bigger themselves. You recognized the pattern, and slowly, interaction by interaction, betrayal by betrayal, you built a database, not of resentment, of understanding. You started seeing people not as good or bad, but as systems running programs they didn't write, programs they didn't question, programs designed to keep them competing, consuming, comparing. And you watched people you loved destroy themselves following these programs. You watched them sacrifice peace for status, trade authenticity for acceptance, kill their own dreams to fit into someone else's vision of success. And somewhere in all that observation, you made a decision. Not consciously, not dramatically. You just stopped participating in your own diminishment. Stopped shrinking to fit into spaces that were too small. Stopped explaining yourself to people who'd already decided who you were. Stopped fighting for relationships with people who only wanted you around when you were useful. You didn't make declarations. You didn't burn bridges. You just quietly withdrew your energy from anything that required you to be less than whole. And that quiet withdrawal, that refusal to negotiate with people who didn't value you, that's what changed everything. The psychologist found old messages, conversations where you tried to explain yourself, tried to make people understand, tried to fix relationships that were broken from the start, and then the messages stopped. Not because you got angry, because you got clear. You realized that understanding isn't the goal. Peace is. And some people will never understand you, because understanding you would require them to question everything they believe about themselves. So you let them keep their version of events. Let them tell their stories. Let them believe what they needed to believe. Because their narrative about you wasn't your problem. Their inability to comprehend your choices wasn't your burden. Their discomfort with your evolution wasn't your emergency. You released yourself from the exhausting job of managing other people's perceptions. And that release, that surrender of control over things you never controlled anyway, that's where the real power came from. Not from fighting, from letting go.